Hey, what is up, everybody? Welcome once again to another edition of B&B Hockey Talk. I'm Aaron Bloxel with my co-host, Matthew Balzer. Welcome once again, as today we talk about a couple of signings. One really big one in the city of Nashville, Hockey Town. Nope, that's Detroit. Smashville. Let's go that way. And we're going to continue our 31 teams in 31 days with the San Jose Sharks. All right, Matt, what do you got for us on the signings today?
All right. So, as I posted earlier on the Facebook page, the Nashville Predators have re-signed defenseman Ryan Ellis to an 8-year extension worth $50 million. That was a $6.25 million cap hit. Just another great deal by David Poyle on his half. It's like Ellis could have commanded a lot more, I think, in the open market. I think he could have gotten $7+ million. I think the one thing that is saving him from making more money is that he hasn't had that super high end offensive year yet. With him only playing half the year last year, 32 points in 44 games. It's like if you go for the full season, that's 50+ points if he was healthy for the entire year. So that, and another big thing, which I actually really didn't know, is that Nashville is really good at not giving out no move clauses or at all. I think the only guy on the team that has one is Pekka Rinne, and he'll be a UFA at the end of the year. So out of all the guys that Nashville has, not one of them except Rinne have no trade clauses. So, but yeah, just another good long-term deal for the Nashville Predators. And then the minor signing, the New Jersey Devils re-signed defenseman Steven Santini to a 3-year deal worth a total of $4.25 million. He split the year between New Jersey and their farm team and should be a depth defenseman. And on injury notes, Edmonton Oilers defenseman Andre Sekera tore his Achilles in an off-ice workout. So his year is basically done, which is a huge loss for the Oilers because Sekera tore his ACL during that playoff run that they were on a couple of years ago and missed basically over half the year last year. And with him being one of their top 2 defensemen that they lean on, it really hurt guys like Clefbaum's play, Darnell Nurse, Adam Larson. It threw guys out of situations where they weren't expected to play.
The poor Edmonton Oilers, as Canuck fans, they just can't catch a break. And I guess when we play them 6 times a year, that might be a good thing. But we still have to play McDavid and a lot of talent there. Great signing by Nashville. I mean, that defense core is sick, absolutely sick. But you mentioned about posting on Facebook. Remember, if you're following us on Facebook, like us, share your comments, as we love to hear from you, and follow us on YouTube and hit that subscribe button. We much love and appreciate you. So let's talk about our 31 teams in 31 days, the San Jose Sharks. They are up. They are looking young and rebuilt, other than a few of their star players. Why don't you take us through potential forward combinations? The team with the beards. Let's go.
All right. So the top line this year I have is Evander Kane, Joe Thornton, and Joe Pavelski. Evander Kane was their big trade deadline pickup, and they were able to re-sign him to a long-term deal, 7 years. With a $7 million cap hit, if I remember correctly. Kane really took off with the Sharks. He had a big, I believe it was a 4 or 5 goal game against the Flames. And in the playoffs, he proved that he belonged with the Sharks. Thornton, another frustrating year with another knee injury that kept him out for just a little under half the season. But yeah, but if he is healthy again, he's one of the best passers in the league, and especially if he's playing with Pavelski and Kane. Both of those guys can fill the net. Joe Pavelski, the team captain, I think he has one of the best hand-eye coordination in the entire NHL. It's like if that puck is around him anywhere near the net and it's in the air, he's going to tip that puck one way or the other. So could potentially be a really good first line. The second line I have is Thomas Hertl, Logan Couture, and Jonas Donskoy. Couture getting that huge extension, the 8-year extension. He should be the Sharks' #1 center, I believe, by next season. One of the most consistent players over the past few years. He had 34 goals and 61 points in 78 games. Between him and Thomas Hertl, who had another 22 goals and 46 points and really took off in the playoffs for them. Both of those are two of their big key pieces that they'll build around in the future. The third line I have is Timo Meier, Chris Tierney, and Kevin Labanc. Tierney really stepped up when Thornton went down. He ended up getting 40 points in 82 games. And Timo Meier, first-round pick from a few years ago, finally broke out this year with 21 goals and 36 points in 81 games. I could see him moving into the top 6, maybe potentially playing over a guy like Donskoy, who is getting up there a little bit in age, and with Meier having a higher ceiling, I could see him moving up in the lineup. And the fourth line, which was actually one of the best in the playoffs last year before they got eliminated, with one minor switch, is Marcus Sorensen, Barclay Goodrow, and Melker Karlsson. They lost Eric Fehr to free agency, who centered that fourth line in the playoffs. But Sorensen had a crazy good playoffs for the Sharks, scoring many big goals for them. He split the year last year between the American League and the big club, but he should have a full-time spot this year. Goodrow, who's usually been like the 13th or 14th forward, could get a full-time spot this year. And Karlsson is an interesting player. If you guys remember, many years ago, he actually played on that top line with Joe Thornton and Pavelski, but ever since then, his career has gone downhill. Only had 19 points last year. And as the 13th forward, young college guy, Dylan Gambrell, who will touch more in the prospects.
Yeah, for me, I'm really excited to see a healthy Joe Thornton this year, playing with Evander Kane and Joe Pavelski. Two very quick wingers, two wingers that can score a lot of goals, and Kane can take the puck to the net. I'm going to be really interested to see how him and Joe Thornton play together. I'm also interested to see San Jose play Toronto this year because of the Joe Thornton and Hazim Kadri fight that happened, where a chunk of Joe Thornton's beard ended up on the ice. I guarantee you something's going to happen there. You mentioned Joe Pavelski and his hand-eye coordination. He's okay if you want him to get to great. He's going to have to score a few goals like Sidney Crosby does, picking those pucks out of the air. But they have, without a lot of people knowing, outside of their top 4 or 5 players, they've really done a quick rebuild. They've got a lot of youth in this lineup. And it's just amazing at how much youth they have that are on the borderline of cracking this team as well. We'll touch on some of them again in the prospects, but they have 15 forwards under NHL contract that have never played an NHL game before. And there's going to be a lot of competition for spots. They've gone young real quick outside of their star players, and it will be definitely interesting to see. So let's jump into their defense. They have 4 guys that are really well known. 2 of them play an absolute ton, and Marc-Edouard Vlasic, and, of course, the other bearded wonder, Brett Burns, the guy that looks like Chewbacca. And, in fact, dresses up as Chewbacca for Halloween because he's a good sport and he loves to entertain kids. But Brett Burns had, and he's probably going to get another 60, 65 points this year, continues to score at a rapid pace, and can play forward every once in a while if they need him to. But him and Vlasic log an absolute ton of minutes. And basically everyone else can just carry the load when they're resting. San Jose is usually pretty good. Pavelski as well plays the point on the power play, so it frees up more time, and they don't need as many defensemen. But outside of that, Brendan Dillon and Justin Braun can be 2 defensive defensemen that can help with the shutdown. And then they've got 3 younger defensemen. Although it was surprising to me, their youngest defensemen, they have 2 of them at the age of 25. This is one of the older defense groups in the entire league. And they have some younger prospects that are coming up. But these guys are still fairly new to the NHL, but aren't as young as you would think. So Joachim Ryan, Tim Heed, and, of course, Dylan DeMello will get his fair share of ice time as well. What do you have for defense? And then take us into the goaltending.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Vlasic and Burns have been one of the most consistent pairings in the NHL. Burns, man, the guy loves to shoot the puck. He had 332 shots on goal last year, compared to like some of the other forwards. Like Pavelski only had like 224. So he does not. Well, when he gets a chance to shoot the puck, he usually takes it. And he did lead the team in points last year with 67. Tim Heed. I think some fans in San Jose didn't like the re-signing of Dylan DeMello, just because he was playing over Tim Heed, and Heed has a lot more offensive upside than DeMello does. So I think that they are hoping he does get into the power play, because both him and Joachim Ryan in the American League put up really good offensive numbers. Ryan his offensive game hasn't adjusted yet to the NHL, but I think in this year his point production will rise, and he could be a good second power play unit quarterback for them.
Excellent. Why don't you take us now through goaltending and North Vancouver's very own starter?
All right. So both returning goalies for them this year. Their number 1 goalie, Martin Jones. Basically, whenever he comes to Vancouver, apparently he gets a shutout, usually, or something along those lines. But yeah, he's one of the best goalies in the NHL, and maybe one of the more underrated and not as talked about as guys like Jonathan Quick and Vasilevsky and guys. But he had 30 wins in 60 games and 4 shutouts, and in the playoffs he played extremely well for the Sharks, helping them sweep the Ducks and then getting them to 6 games through against Vegas. And their backup goalie, Aaron Dell, got into 29 games and had a really good record, 15-5-4 with 2 shutouts, and got awarded with a 2-year contract extension. So he's one of the best backup goalies in the NHL. But yeah, it's a good goalie duo that they have there in San Jose. And their third stringer is goalie Antoine Bibeau, who was drafted by the Toronto Maple Leafs in 2013 in the 6th round. He got into like 1 or 2 games with the Leafs, but came over to San Jose and had really good numbers in the American League, going 23-14-2 in 43 games, but had a .919 save percentage and 5 shutouts. So he'll be their third stringer this coming year.
Awesome! It's always fun to watch a North Vancouver goaltender succeed in the NHL. He's one of those guys, like you said, he's very quiet. He's quiet about his business, but he gets it done, and he always has a good season under his belt. And, a big reason why San Jose had such a good season. So let's jump into their prospects. I'm going to go over a couple guys that a lot of people are projecting to make this hockey club, and then we'll touch on a few others, and Matt will touch on some as well. But you mentioned the centerman Dylan Gamble already. He was a second-round pick in 2016. He played for the University of Denver last year in the NCAA, ended up with 43 points in 41 games, which is excellent at the NCAA level. Got in at the end of the season, signed a contract, got in 3 NHL games before the end of the season, was unfortunately not able to earn a point, but he's projected to potentially make this team, or at least start for the farm team, the San Jose Barracudas. Now, another guy that they are looking at making his team is a guy by the name of Rudolf Balcers. He's a left winger. He was a late pick, 2015. He was a 5th-round draft pick. But for the Barracudas last year in the farm team, he had 67 games and 48 points, 4 points in 4 games in the playoffs. He's got a huge offensive upside, and They, even some websites have him penciled in on this fourth line. Their number one draft prospect was their first-round pick from this year in 2018, defenseman Ryan Merkley, still very young, played for the Guelph Storm last year in the OHL. Defenseman, 63 games and 67 points, so he's obviously an offensive defenseman. Had 6 points in 6 games, of which 5 were assists in the playoffs. He's probably going to play in Guelph again this year, so he's at least a year or two away from making his professional debut. And last guy I'll touch on has a huge offensive upside, but didn't get to play a whole lot because of injuries last year. For the San Jose Barracuda, he was a 5th-round pick in 2014. Rourke Cartier played in 28 games, had 21 points for the Barracuda, and he had 3 points in 3 games, 2 of which were goals in the playoffs for them. Huge offensive upside. Played the full season the year before for the Barracuda, and if it wasn't for the injuries, was supposed to play a lot for the Sharks this year. But in 2017, he had 35 points in 67 games, and it turned a lot of heads. He's got probably the highest offensive upside out of any of their prospects, and is looking to try to crack this lineup. But I see him potentially playing for the Barracuda instead of the Sharks to start the season. What do you got for us, Matt?
All right. First off, I got their first-round pick from 2017, centerman Josh Norris. He had 23 points in 37 games for Michigan last year in the NCAA. He is an intriguing prospect that could potentially be battling for a bottom 6 spot for them, but I see him going back to college again this year or to their farm team. Another guy is defenseman Kyle Wood, who they got in a trade from the Arizona Coyotes this offseason. He hasn't gotten into an NHL game yet, but his numbers in the American League have been very good over the past couple years. He had 19 points in 49 games last year in the American League, but the year before he had 40-plus points for the Tuscan Roadrunners. So he could potentially be a depth defenseman for them this coming year. Another guy, Maxim Luchanov, another guy that they got over from Arizona, I believe, had 28 points in 36 games for Connecticut in the NCAA, and could potentially make this team out of training camp. This is a guy that they're pretty high on, so it could potentially be a bottom 6 spot. And they signed a couple of guys over from Europe, both forwards. Vincent Praplan, who had 39 points in 47 games in the Swiss league, and Antti Suomela, who had 21 goals, 60 points in 59 games in the Finnish league. Both of these guys, sort of like a Jonas Donskoi, who was over in Europe and came over and started actually getting pretty good numbers in the NHL, could be pushing for spots. I believe they're a little bit older, in their mid-20s. So we'll see how they transition to the pro league. And then just to touch on Ryan Merkley again. I think a lot of draft analysts had a lot of question marks around him, not on his offensive ability, but on his defensive game. And that's why he slipped, and a lot of teams passed over him, because offensively everything's there. You can bring up a guy like Ryan Murphy, who Carolina drafted. He had all that offensive ability, but there was a lot of question marks on his defensive side, and you can see where he went, where he hasn't really gotten a full-time spot in the NHL. He's been up and down. But I think Merkley has a little bit more upside than what Murphy had. So it'll be interesting to see in years to come how he transitions.
Latunov, of course, who you mentioned, big size, which is what a lot of people like, 6'4", and can play both the wing and down the middle. One player we forgot to mention that a lot of experts have in their top 5 is defenseman Mario Ferraro, who was a second-round pick in 2017, played for University of Massachusetts last year. The same amount of points as Josh Norris, but he's a defenseman, 23 points in 39 games. They've got him potentially He's got options, but they're saying he will probably be playing for the Barracuda to start the year. He doesn't reach that minimum age of 25 yet to make the big club, right? Anyways, the San Jose Sharks finished 100 points last year, surprising many because a lot of people were talking about the Sharks and the Ducks declining, the LA Kings declining, and now the San Jose Sharks seem to be the only team in the upswing because they've snuck in this rebuild while keeping a lot of their veterans. Where do you see them finishing this year?
All right, so this might come to a surprise for some people, but I have them finishing in first place in the Pacific Division this year. I like what they have up front, bringing in Kane last year, and with younger guys like Couture and Hurdle, and those veteran presences of Thornton and Pavelski. There's a lot up there, and Brent Burns and Mark-Edward Vlasic solidifying their defense, and Jones, one of the most consistent goalies in the NHL. I see Vegas taking just a little bit of a digression this year. But yeah, I see them on the top of the Pacific Division, probably around 110 points.
For me, I see them. I've kind of thrown this one around a little bit because I actually see them declining, but I don't see any other teams in the Pacific that are willing to step up. I mean, if Calgary gets to some goaltending, they might be ready to step up, but to surpass the Sharks in the standings, I don't know. I still think it's the Vegas Golden Knights division to win, but and the LA Kings and the Anaheim Ducks, if they both regress this year, it could be interesting. I see them around the 90 to 95 point mark, but that still might be good enough to win this division because if everybody's regressing and they all have to play each other, there'll be a lot of teams in and around the 85 to 95 point range, and it'll be really interesting to see. It really depends to me if they continue to get consistent goaltending from Martin Jones and Aaron Dell, as well as not run into any injuries. Like, can you imagine this team if Evander Kane and Brett Burns go down with injuries? I mean, they rely on some guys way too much. But here's the amazing thing is those guys are always playing 80-plus games a season. So why not be healthy? and so I do see them finishing in the top three. I don't know where I see them yet. I don't see them finishing first, so either second or third. But I don't really see a lot of teams that can push to surpass them. It'll be definitely an interesting season. So again, if you like this episode, if you like what we're doing, hit the love button on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube. We are B&B Hockey Talk. That's B&B, not the word and, but the symbol. This is Aaron Bloxel with my co-host Matthew Balzer. Thanks again so much for watching. Tomorrow we'll be back again with another episode. Everyone have a fantastic evening, and we'll see you all tomorrow.